welcome to the webinar, and welcome also to those who are going to be watching the replay later. My name is John Golden. I am the CMSO at Pipeliner, Pipeliner Sales, Pipeliner CRM, and today we're going to talk about fixing forecasting, and the format's going to be, this is an interactive session, so we want to hear from you as well. This is a discussion format. And on it, during this discussion, we're going to talk about forecasting. Don Alder, our EVP of Sales, is going to talk about his experience around forecasting, and we really want to get your input and your feedback as well during the session to make it very interactive. So let's get straight into it. Just wanted to share just a couple of quick stats around forecasting. So fewer than 20% of sales organizations have forecast accuracy of 75% or greater. And that's from Miller Heimann research. And I think that's probably been our experience in a lot of different companies. I'd be interested to get your feedback on that, but certainly forecasting, forecast accuracy has always been an issue and remains one today, which is why we are going to figure out how to fix it. And only 45% of sales leaders and sellers have high confidence in their organization's forecasting accuracy. That's from Gartner. And then 40% of sales operations leaders identified seller subjectivity as the greatest challenge to forecast accuracy. That's from Korn Ferry. So again, that's the kind of gut feel, which I think a lot of forecasting still relies on subjectivity and gut feel. And great if you're that accurate. That's fantastic. You should probably play the lottery. But otherwise, we know what happens when we're too subjective. And then once you remove human bias, errors, and other issues that stem from manual effort, satisfaction with forecasting accuracy grows to 76%. So that's interesting. Once you actually start to systematize it, the accuracy grows. Okay, so without any more of that, we should move on. And now what I want to just draw attention to you is the Q&A, just the Q&A button at the bottom. Please, if you want to ask a question, use the Q&A. You can use the chat as well, but it'd be nicer if you use the Q&A. And then we will answer. We have on standby, we have Todd Martin and we have Nicholas Kinla, who are on standby to answer your questions, and we may answer some of them live as well, depending on it. So, all right, let's get straight into this now, and let's talk about forecasting. And Don, I think Don's going to kick us off here. Don, you've been a sales leader for many years, probably more years than you care for us to mention. So sure. I won't. Just say it spans at least a century. But anyway, so in your years as sales leader, what are some of the forecasting issues that you've had to deal with?
Well, you touched on one of them, John, in your introduction, which is I've certainly seen methodologies change over the years, what's common. But the biggest problem I've always had with forecasting is that measure of subjectivity, or what we call gut feel, right? I can think back 40 years ago, managing sales teams and sitting down with a rep, going through their deals and trying to get them to tell me whether a deal is going to close or not. And there weren't a lot of great metrics that we were using to try to measure whether or not this deal really is in good shape or not, right? And how can we reliably believe, look, as a sales leader, I can't be intimately involved in every deal, right? Especially the larger my sales team gets, the harder it becomes for me to have intimate knowledge of all the details of every deal. And so what do? I rely on those people who are closest to the deal to convince me that, yeah, they feel great about this deal. And what do? Well, we look at things like a BANT, right? Qualification. Okay, well, that's old as the hills. And it's not necessarily giving us the information that I really want. Just because somebody has a budget doesn't mean that we're going to win the deal, right? So I need more concrete information that's not so subjective, right? things that we can actually measure, and ideally things that I don't have to measure, things that can be measured automatically and that I can be informed of. And so I think long gone, this is in an idealistic point of view, long gone are the days where we as sales leaders can simply rely on the members of our sales team, and no matter how many layers that might be, to a frontline sales manager working its way up to the ladder to the head of sales. We cannot rely on just gut feel. It's just not something that's going to work anymore. And one of the things we know is that selling has become much more complex today than it was 40 years ago. And so it's an ever-evolving environment that we have to try to manage. Now, here at Pipeliner, we think we've done a pretty good job of putting together a methodology, right? And we're happy to share that with everybody here today. But that methodology focuses more on things that can be measured automatically, right, using the right systems, and can provide me with a really detailed evaluation of a pipeline at the touch of a button, right? Something I can visualize on the screen at any point in time that I want to evaluate a pipeline. And so in trying to design this system that we use ourselves internally, the one thing that struck us is, look, we're pretty smart people, we're happy to say, but we're not going to think of everything, right? And so that's part of the discussion we want to have here, is we can talk about how our system looks at quantifiable, measurable things, right, that really give us insight into how strong an opportunity is and how likely it is to close. But there are also things that we may have missed. And so the whole idea was to gather this group of people here, find out from them, hey, what are the key metrics and the key indicators that they rely on to give them confidence in a forecast? Because if there's something we missed that's really crucial, we want to make sure that we embed that into our system. Now, let's
have a quick poll here, just about, let's see, how about the forecast? How accurate do you think your forecasting is? And obviously this is anonymous poll, so don't worry about that. But,
you're not going to be judged. And nobody wants to say that their forecasting is horrible, but for the sake of having a meaningful conversation, let's be as open as we can be here about our forecasting. Absolutely.
And we just give it a couple more moments for the last couple of people here who want to participate in the poll. Okay. All right, I'm going to end the poll right now. Okay, let's share the results here.
Interesting.
Okay, so 50% plus is what most people are saying here. It's interesting. Okay, let's move on. Does anybody have a question that they would like to ask at this juncture, or reaction of anything to what Don just said? If you have, just raise your hand. We may start coming and asking directly people in a few moments, but yeah, if you have any comments, comments, or raise your hand. Okay, back to you, Don.
One of the things that I thought was really important to talk about is, in a variety of organizations that I've worked for over the years, I've seen so many different expectations. For example, in your sales organization, do you expect an individual contributor to be accurately forecasting their personal pipeline? Right? Does the responsibility start with the salesperson? Or, for example, when you have a couple of lines of management, is that frontline manager responsible for managing that forecast? Where does that responsibility lie? It's an important question, because one thing that I've always learned in a sales organization is that the more I can impart process and procedure all the way down to that frontline salesperson, right? Then I'm doing a couple of things. One, I'm having them take responsibility for their own forecast. Of course, they're always responsible for their quota, but quota is one part of the equation and forecasting is another, right? And I want them to take ownership and responsibility for their forecasting. And then secondarily, if you don't do that, does the sales manager bear the brunt of that responsibility, right? Where does the buck stop? And it's important because, one of the things that a sales leader is supposed to do in working with their whole team is to mentor and build a succession plan, right? So that people have a career path in a sales organization. And so if I end up with a bunch of salespeople who can't forecast, don't understand how we forecast or why we do the things we do, I'm not doing a good job of building up their skill set so they can be more effective at what they do and see a career path moving forward in the organization. And so I find that interesting. I can tell you years ago, I think back to a role I had in New York, where every Friday, and this is unbelievable, at 6 a.m. to 8 o'clock at night was the forecast call. Can you imagine? 14 hours of forecast call. Because what we did was we called every branch office, starting in Europe, and then working our way across North America. And in every branch office, every rep with their sales manager had to go through every deal that was in the forecast and convince us that it was a good deal. 14 hours. And in that room, there were 11 people taking notes and trying to manage the forecast. Well, today, using the tools that we've incorporated into Pipeliner CRM, I can get that information with the click of my mouse. It's not a 14-hour phone call. It's a 1-second click. And all that information is available to me. And so I think the world's come a long way in that time period from what's possible, right? And what tools are out there. And one of the things we wanted to stress about what we do here at Pipeliner is that, look, we're a CRM platform. And you may be a customer of ours, you may not be. But in our CRM platform, one of the things that we believe in is that, hey, all of this data resides in the CRM, or it should, right? If you've set it up properly, all this data is there. So why on earth would I want to buy another application that I'm going to import this data from my CRM into this other tool that's then going to provide me with some insight into my forecasting? I'm just spending more money to do something I should already be able to do in my CRM. Right? So in Pipeliner, our belief is, hey, we're going to empower our customers to have all of this functionality, right? To actually analyze on a qualitative basis every deal in the system. Now, the great news is when we do this, we have a bunch of pre-built parameters that you can set, right? To decide, is this deal in good shape? Is it actually going to close? But on top of those pre-built parameters, you can modify all of those pre-built parameters so that it fits the way you want to work and the way you want to manage your team. And lastly, there's the ability for you to add any custom parameter. So if we haven't thought of everything and you want to add something else that's part of the evaluation, you can do that, right? And the great news about this is it doesn't cost you anything. It's built into the CRM. And so, I'm not sitting here trying to give you a sales pitch, right? If you're interested in what we do, we'll gladly schedule time with you to go through our forecasting methodology and our tool that's built into our CRM on a one-on-one basis, right? We'll schedule time. But today I want to talk about, and I'm going to dive into them now, some of the things that we measure. And then I want to see what's missing, right? If you have something that's missing by all means, I want to hear about it, because anything we can do to improve our tool, of course, we're very interested in knowing. This is something that we do habitually here at Pipeliner, is, we're always looking to improve our tool, and we use customer insight because if you don't know us that well yet, Pipeliner is an agnostic tool, right? It's not designed for any one particular industry. It can be customized to fit any business process for a sales organization. And so as we work with different verticals, different companies, different teams, different processes, right, then we find out things that people are doing. And if we like what they're doing, if we think it has a general application, then we want to try to build that into our system. So let me just stop there for a second, and I'm going to go down through a list of some of the things that we do in analyzing deals and see if they resonate with you or if you have anything else you want to add to this list. And I'm going to go right down this list that's right as it appears in our product interface.
And just before you go there, I just want to do just going to do another quick poll. Did the quick poll come up? No, it's not. Sorry. Go ahead.
Okay.
Oh, yes,
go ahead.
Here we go. I was just wondering, so who's at the organizations either you're at or you've worked at in the past or whatever, who has primarily been responsible for forecasting? Has it been just the salesperson themselves? Has it been the sales manager? Is it a collaborative effort? If you could just let us know from your experience, either at your current company or at other companies that you've worked in the past. Oh, that's very interesting. Okay, I'm just going to end the poll in a second. If anybody, last couple of people want to participate. All right, very good. Okay, share results. So mostly it's a collaborative effort, but some places it's been the sales manager and some place the salesperson. So interesting, I think, Don, and this is our experience, that there's no real consistency across organizations. A lot of organizations do things differently. And I think that also contributes at the end of the day to some of the forecasting issues, because either if you have a salesperson doing another one, a sales manager, or the collaborative would seem like the more ideal scenario. But again, it all depends on the data.
Yeah, agreed. And one of the great things about the way we do it in Pipeliner is that all of the functionality I'm about to talk about is exposed to the salesperson, to the sales manager. It can be reviewed in a collaborative environment. It handles all of those situations, right? It's not just, hey, here's a management report and Big Brother's looking over your shoulder. That information and the process and the functionality is built into the system, and it's something that the sales rep can look at to understand their own pipeline better. It's something the sales manager can look at either on a one-on-one basis with their sales team members or just looking at the whole team in general. But let's run through some of these things that we look at to determine how healthy, or the word we actually use is fitness, right? What's the fitness level of an opportunity as it appears in my forecast? And so one of those indicators that we use is simply the closing date, right? For every deal in our system, we have an expected closing date. And I think we can all agree that, as an example, if a deal had, an expected closing date of June 15th, and today is June 23rd, and that deal has not closed, that should raise a red flag. Right? We had a closing date for a reason, right? In previous conversation or expectation, maybe email exchange, we were led to believe this deal was going to close on the 15th. It did not. A red flag should go up, right? To bring to our attention that, hey, this deal's not acting the way we thought it was going to. And so that's one of those indicators, right? Closing date is overdue. Another one that is something that's a little harder to do when you're just sitting one-on-one with somebody and having a conversation about how their deals are going, is what we call low engagement. So what is low engagement? Well, in this case, low engagement is measuring what kind of response you're getting from your client or your customer, right? Your prospect. It's one thing to say that my sales rep is calling them every day, sending email after email after email. But if the client is never responding, there's no return email, right? They didn't read the email. What's the volume of email that's coming in from the prospect? All these things can be set to indicate to you what you believe would be low engagement, because that, again, should be a warning sign, right? My rep feels like it's a perfect fit. Oh my gosh, it's a great opportunity. He's going to make a huge commission. He's excited about this deal. But when I look at, under the covers at the engagement, my rep is spinning his wheels. He's working like crazy under the water, right? But my client is not engaging. And that's something that should be considered when we're evaluating our pipeline.
Yeah, that's Don, just a quick question from somebody here, and I think this is perfect. Just what you're talking about. So the question is, so when you're forecasting, you are also looking at the underlying, as you said, we call it fitness, the underlying activities and things that are going on within that account, rather than obviously relying on the salesperson to say, yeah, everything's going well. You actually can dig down into the detail.
Yes, and we automate that whole process. Now, I would personally, I kind of like to invite a combination of those things. I use the analytics to tell me how good does this deal look, right? But if my rep is sitting here saying, no, I swear to God, it's a great deal, we're going to close this deal, I want to hear why he believes that. But he's going to have something very convincing if all the metrics say otherwise, right? But I'm interested in hearing both. But yeah, our system is taking a look at all the underlying activity, right? The next one on my list is, look, when we're looking at a deal in a pipeline, we're looking at a sales process, right? We have steps in the process, from qualification at the very beginning to, hey, a deal's closed over here on the far end of my funnel. And if we have moved backwards in that process, right? I was in negotiation, we're close, but now something happened. Maybe somebody left that client organization. We've got a new person to deal with, and we're having to start over with a new demonstration, right? We've just gone backwards in our sales process. That's another indicator that this deal is at risk. And so we want to keep track of things like that, right? No follow-up. No follow-up is really simple. Right? My sales rep has a sales process to take this client along, right? A journey that we're trying to get them to follow. Because we know if we follow our sales process, we have the best possibility of winning a deal. But if I have a process, but I look and there's nothing scheduled, there's no next step, there's no follow-up, there's no meeting, there's no phone call, there's no email that needs to be sent, then if I'm going to be really harshly critical, to me, it looks like the salesperson sitting around waiting for the phone to ring instead of being proactive, right? And trying to help this deal to continuously move forward. So when there's no follow-up planned, right, that's another indicator that the deal's not as healthy as we think. Now, another setting we use, we call ranking. And the ranking in Pipeliner speak is the sales rep expressing their gut feel. Okay, so gut feel still has a part to play in this. So the sales rep is telling us how certain he is. How committed is he that he's going to close this deal? Right? Now, if he's 100%, hallelujah. But if he says 10%, that's a warning sign, right? I could be in the final stages of closing this deal, but my rep is telling me he's only 10% sure he's going to close the deal. I need to know that before I commit this deal to my forecast, right? Because ultimately, when I commit a forecast, I'm taking responsibility for it. Okay? So if the ranking decreases, right? If my sales rep was 75% certain, now he's dropped to 50%. That's a warning sign I need to pay attention to. We look at tasks, right? As we're working a deal, there are tasks that need to be completed. I need to follow up on this. I need to send out a list of referrals, right? I need to send them a technical spec sheet to the CIO, whatever it might be that's part of this process we're working on. If my tasks have been assigned and they're overdue, right? I was supposed to send John an email 2 days ago and I didn't do it. Well, the system's going to monitor that and tell us that that task was not done on time. It still has not been done. So what's happening, right? My prospect is expecting something from us and they're not getting it, but they might be getting it from another vendor. And so it's putting us at risk, right? So we always wanted to take that into consideration.
Yeah, just a quick question, Don, from Wolfgang. Thank you, Wolfgang. When evaluating contacts between salesperson and potential client, does it cover 1 phone calls, 2 emails, 3 text messages, 4 Zoom meetings, 5 live meetings? So basically, when you're evaluating the interaction, what does it measure?
So interaction is measuring any sort of activity, okay? But primarily we're looking at emails. So when we talk about the one that is called low engagement, that's the customer, right? We're not measuring the salesperson, we're measuring the customer. So we're saying, has the customer responded? It's not so much about what the sales rep is doing. We have a different measurement coming up here in just a minute that measures what the sales rep is doing. But in this case, we're saying the one that I covered earlier is just about, is my audience responsive, right? If they're not, right, I can go look at my history of emails, and if all I see is a string of emails going out from my sales rep and no response from the customer, I lose confidence very quickly that that deal's going anywhere, okay? So just to be clear, that was something we called low engagement, and that's measuring the customer's response.
And
now,
just and Don, sorry, a follow-up question, so you can just roll straight into it from Wolfgang, is how does the time between an intended contact and response from the client influence the probability result?
So what we can do in our measurement of low engagement is we allow you to set what is the number of responses that you expect over what period of time. And you can enter 3 different levels of activity to be, let's use a stoplight as an example. If you're getting, 3 responses over a 10-day period, you might say, hey, that looks green, right? Everything's a go. If you're getting 2 responses, it's a yellow. And if you're getting 1 or none, it's red, right? So everything, we color code everything in Pipeliner. But you have control over those variables to set them however you want to measure. Okay? Now, the opposite of that, we do look at something called low email outreach. Right? So in this case, we're looking at and we're measuring the number of emails that have been sent from the salesperson to the prospect. And again, you can determine what's a healthy number, what's not, right? And you can turn, in any one of these measures, by the way, you can turn on or off. You don't have to use them, but they're all here predefined, and you can turn them on and you can customize the settings for each one. And by the way, as I go through these, remember what I said earlier, these are the preset parameters, but we also give you the ability to create your own custom parameters in Pipeliner. So for example, Wolfgang, if what you wanted was to create a measurement of how many phone calls had been made, right? You can measure that as well. But in this case, we're focused primarily on emails in our pre-built parameters, but you can add others, right? As I said, we haven't thought of everything, but we've got about a dozen in here that are predefined for you. So low email outreach is another, right? Many closing date updates. What does that mean? Well, we had a closing date of June 15th, and then it got changed to June 17th. And then it got changed to June 20th. And then the 22nd. Now it's changed to June 30th. Right? So if the deal's constantly moving, that might be an indicator that there's a problem. Okay. So hopefully this is starting to give you an idea of some of the things that we factor into a forecast. We also use things like sales step velocity. Now that may sound confusing, but what it means in our world is, as I described, we have a sales process. And in our process, there might be 5 or 6 steps in the process. And in each step, there are many tasks that need to be completed. But for each step, we've defined how long on average should it take, right? From the time I have somebody in proposal stage to we move into negotiation stage, how much time typically does it take? Maybe it's 2 weeks. So if I set it to 2 weeks, but now I've got a deal that's been in proposal stage for over 2 weeks, right? A red flag is going to be raised to say, hey, here's another indicator that says things aren't moving as you expected. Okay, and velocity is something you can set for every stage in your sales process, and we'll monitor that for you. Okay. Lastly, for this discussion, I'll talk about value decrease. Should be pretty straightforward and easy to understand, but let's say I've got a deal, it's worth $100,000. But tomorrow I go in and edit that deal and the value dropped to $45,000. Well, you can set that by dollar amount, you can set it by percent. I think it's set by percentage. So if there's a certain percentage drop off in the value of a deal, raise a flag, right? Now, it may not mean that the deal's not healthy. We may still win the deal. It may still be in great shape on all the other metrics, but it certainly affected my forecast, right? It just dropped by 50% on that one deal. So these are all things that are built into Pipeliner, and all you have to do is turn them on. It's a click of a button to turn one of these on, and then if you wanted to, you can go in and kind of reset the metrics, like how many emails should be going out, right? So if you're not using all these indicators in your forecasting process, I would suggest a couple of things. One, start thinking about how you can incorporate more metrics, right? More objective evaluation of what's happening in your pipeline rather than subjective. I think there's a place for some, level of subjectivity, but it's only a part of the total forecasting methodology. And then secondly, you ought to...
Another question, sorry, just Don, another question is like, somebody just asked, like, historical data is how they have forecasted, or their company has forecasted a lot in the past. Reliance on historical data. But as you would probably outline, historical data obviously has a role to play, but it's not the exclusive one. I worked in an organization one time where the head of sales, even setting quotas was just, here's what you did last year and here's another 15% for this year and off you go. But so how much does historical data play in the forecasting process?
So it plays a lot. So first of all, let's just be clear. These parameters I was just talking about are things that affect the health of a deal, okay? It's not directly impacting my forecast. And what I mean by that is it's giving me a value, right? It's telling me, is this deal in trouble? Does it look problematic? If so, why, right? That helps me to decide, do I want to include this deal in my forecast or not? Okay. So, I mean, ultimately you could set up the system to decide for you, but I still like to have the final word. And because I'm going to look at all those metrics, I'm going to listen to the subjective side, and I'm going to decide, do I want to commit this deal to the forecast? Now, if I commit it to the forecast, then in Pipeliner, we go to another screen, which is the forecast tool. Okay, that's not the same as setting these parameters for fitness. In the forecast tool, now I can take a look at what is my actual forecast and how does that relate to quota attainment, either by company or by rep or by team, right? However I want to slice and dice it. And we're going to look at historic data as one of the algorithms, that didn't come out very well, algorithms that affect not the number that we call forecast, but we have a column that we call prediction, right? So we take the forecast, which is I've evaluated all the deals, I've decided which ones I want to include in the forecast, and now I've got a number. Let's say that number is $500,000 for the month of June. Now the system is going to, in the prediction column, it's going to look at my team, and it's going to look at a number of different things that we can collect over time. For example, is there seasonality, right? Is June typically a low production month? Because, I don't know, people on summer vacation, whatever it might be. Does this particular sales rep have a history of having low, average, or high productivity in the month of June themselves? Maybe there's no seasonality for the company, but for the rep, for some reason there is, right? So I can look at that, and the algorithm will tell me, hey, the forecast may say $500,000, but based on the history of data we have, and obviously the longer you've used Pipeliner, the more historic data we would have to affect this for you. And that prediction might then say, well, we're going to predict, $415,000, not $500,000. And so then I can decide for myself, do I want to use my forecast of $500,000, or do I want to use the prediction value, right, that is applying these algorithms of past performance, both on the company level and on the individual level, to get a more, I don't know if I want to use the word precise, but maybe a more scientific approach to what the actual value would be, okay? So yeah, all of that's built into Pipeliner. And John, you mentioned quota. That's part of our forecast tool as well. So, if you need a tool that manages quota for your sales team, that allows you to assign quota any number of ways. As John was mentioning, I can say, look, everybody on my team shares an equal percentage of the company goal, and it will evenly divide that up. On paper, that may sound like a good idea, but the fact is, we all know, right, if you've been managing sales teams for a while, depending on how your teams work, if you have geographic distribution of opportunities, that some geographic areas are more prolific than others, right? And so should that rep have the same quota? Up to you to decide, but we might want to think about that distribution. Is past performance an indicator, right? If Todd was my #1 salesperson last year and he was 120% of quota, should I give him an equivalent share of this year's company quota? Not the same number he had last year, but the same percentage of the overall goal assigned to Todd. Todd's probably going, oh, I don't know about that. But I can tell the system that's what I want to do. I want to base the quota assignment based on historic achievement by the sales reps. Now, you have to think about that, because if I have an underperforming sales rep, I don't want to just give an underperforming sales rep an underperforming goal, right? He still needs to have a realistic goal, a stretch goal, right, to go after. I don't want to just say, okay, you're an underperformer, so let's just allow you to continue to be underperforming. But the tool allows you to do all of this stuff. And one of the great things about this is when you're looking at the forecast is, for the company, here's the number. But if I just click on a button, it'll split that out by sales rep. And now I can see for every rep on the team, how are they performing against their quota? What's in their pipeline against their quota? Everything that I want to see. And by the way, while I'm looking at this on one part of the screen, the bottom part of the screen, I can get all the detail in every single one of these deals. So I can dive into all these metrics and parameters and understand what's happening. It's really, I got to tell you, I've been doing this, like John said, longer than you'd want to know. I just got a haircut. Otherwise, you'd see a lot more gray hair here. I just cut off all the gray. And most of that comes from forecasting. But the fact is that I've never come across a tool in any CRM that allows you to manage the sales team's quotas on a team and individual basis, to assign quotas, to manage forecast, to have all these parameters that help you get under the covers and really see what's going on with an opportunity, on top of hearing what your sales rep has to say, right? I really like the answer, John, that in the poll where people said it's a collaborative effort, because it is. And you need that input from the salesperson. And as a team, you need to be able to decide, what are the next steps? What do we do? How do we progress this deal? Right?
Yeah. And just quick time check here. I mean, we've got another couple of minutes, so if you've got any last questions, get them in, because Don's going to go into his wrap up in just a moment. All right, Don, go ahead. I'll tell you if there's any more questions.
Okay. So look, I am the head of sales here at Pipeliner, so there has to be a sales pitch in here if you haven't already figured out that there's a bit of one baked into all of this. I hope that when you walk away from this meeting, that you've got some ideas about how you might look at your own forecasting and think about how you can employ more metrics in that process. Things that are meaningful about what's happening in the deal, what's being done, what's not being done. What are those indicators that are hiding behind the scenes that, if you had access to, could give you a really good insight into the strength and likelihood of the deal closing? And if nothing else, if you come away with that and it helps you to do a better job forecasting, then I'll consider today's webinar to be a success. Now, to get more salesy about it, if you're using a CRM today and you don't have the ability that I just discussed, or if you have a CRM today and in order to get this sort of functionality, you had to buy a third-party add-on tool, which probably came close to doubling your per user price for CRM and forecasting, then you ought to take a look at what Pipeliner has to offer. Because these things I'm talking about are one small piece of all the things that Pipeliner builds into our CRM tool that you don't have to go subscribe to third-party tools for. And I'm here to tell you, one of the things that we do an awful lot of is we convert people from one system to another. It's really interesting to sit back and watch. If we don't win a deal, in about a year and a half, it's not unusual that we find out that the decision they made for CRM ended up not working for them, didn't give them what they wanted, ended up costing a lot more than they thought, was too difficult to manage and implement and administer. And so they come back to us and say, hey, can we talk again? And so we're very good at taking data out of one system, putting it into another so that you can be up and running in a number of days very easily. So don't let the, what I'll call the intimidation factor of switching from one platform to another scare you off. If you don't already have a CRM system and you're thinking about CRM in the near term, hopefully this sort of insight into how Pipeliner works, you haven't even seen the product, but you're hearing about the level of detail that we go into and everything that we do in Pipeliner, then you'll consider us. And feel free to reach out to us. Happy to demonstrate the forecasting tool, the quota management, all of that for you so you get a better idea of what it looks and feels like and how you interact with it on a daily basis. Happy to do that for you. Just reach out to us and we'll schedule time with you one-on-one.
All right, listen, thank you everybody who joined today. Thank you people who participated in the polls, people who asked questions. This recording will be available to you and obviously to everybody else who registered and weren't able to make the live meeting. Again, PiplinerSales.com. If you haven't already checked out Pipeliner, go check out PiplinerSales.com. Take a free trial, look at the product. We have a whole we have a page dedicated to some forecasting and so let's fix forecasting. We've invested a lot of time and energy into creating what we think is the best and what we know is the best forecasting tool out there, because we've compared it to anything else on the market. And let's face it, in these times of uncertainty, the one thing you need to be able to do is to forecast as accurately as possible, because it could be the difference between your business thriving or surviving and not, because of the disparities. So it's an incredibly important topic. So again, thanks for today. Thank you, Don. Great overview. Thank you, Todd and Nicholas, for looking after the chat and the questions. And above all, thank you all for joining us and engaging in this webinar. And thanks for all the feedback. And we'll see you for another webinar soon.